Few objects in history have sparked as much fascination and debate as the Shroud of Turin. Is it an ancient relic connected to Jesus, or one of history's greatest mysteries still waiting to be solved? Let's start at the very beginning. For those who may only vaguely know about the Shroud of Turin, what is it?
The shroud is believed to be the burial cloth that Jesus was buried in following the crucifixion. And it's a 14-foot long by about 3.5 feet wide linen cloth. And it currently resides in Turin. There's a cathedral in Turin, and it's kept safe in a sort of environmentally controlled box on the side of the altar in that cathedral in Turin.
Why has this cloth, this it's not a big cloth, is this particular cloth fascinated scientists and historians for so long?
Uh, for a textile, for a fabric, as an historical artifact, it is pretty large. It's over 14 feet long, as Robert said. The main reason it fascinates science is that it bears upon it the image of a tortured and crucified man. We can find no way that the image was rendered onto the cloth. There's no paint, dyes, powders, inks, oils, nothing. There's nothing in there that would tell us what it is. It does seem to be three-dimensionally encoded into the top 2 to 5 microns of the fibrils, not each thread, but the very fibrils that make up a thread on the surface of the cloth. So it's a pretty fascinating artifact. We still to this day don't know how it was made. We have a lot of theories, radiation and so forth, but we still don't have any real knowledge on how it was done.
Okay, amazing. And just before we delve into some of those theories and the legitimacy of the shroud, what was it that personally drew you to study it? Because both of you have completed a certificate in shroud studies.
Yeah, I suppose for me it was just a case of being attracted to it. I heard an interview, the same one that I already heard on Pints with Aquinas, with this priest, Father Andrew Dalton, an American priest in Rome, who teaches on that certificate in shroud studies. And it just piqued my interest. I was already, getting into saying my rosary and learning about the passion of the Lord, and how important it is to reflect on that, to meditate on that. And this just took that interest and that devotion to a much deeper level, because it allowed me to understand much at a forensic level, essentially, what the Lord went through in his passion. And then from there, as Artie was mentioning there, this mystery of how the image was created and how that can help us to understand better the actual resurrection. So all of that just fascinated me, and I've been sort of following the path since then.
At an early age, as a young boy, my mother had went and seen a talk about it with a Father McKillop up in Turf Lodge here in West Belfast. And he gave out photographs. My mother gave me one of those. I was interested in photography as a young boy. And on that, I knew it was Jesus as soon as I saw it. So I was immediately fascinated by how this was possible. And pretty much it's been a lifelong fascination since that.
What have you learned about it? What is the evidence to support the authenticity of the Shroud of Turin?
Artie's said it before in our series on the radio program, that it's the most studied artifact in archaeological history.
Yeah.
It's like an endless kind of mountain of information. But in terms of the authenticity, there's a number of different factors that point to its validity, its authenticity. I mean, scripturally, there's a whole lot of reference to it, which we see, in all four of the Gospels, the mention of the cloth. And if you look at the different facts related to the cloth, that it was a crucified man, that there was the crown of thorns, that there was the spear wound, that there's all the things, the markings that we know of from the Lord's passion, like the statistical probability of all of those things being true and captured in this linen cloth from this time in history, from this place in history, where we've got granules of pollen from that part of Jerusalem. We've got dirt samples from when the Lord, fell on his knee, and that part of the shroud showing little tiny microscopic pieces of dirt that come only from that place in Jerusalem. So there's a whole lot of evidence essentially that points to A, this really is the burial cloth of Jesus if you look at the statistical probability of all of those things being true at the same time, and B, that it is um, that old from that place, in history, etc. And it just fits like a puzzle piece in terms of all of the references in the gospel as far as it bringing to life all of that information. So it's convinced me anyway. The church is a little bit careful. It says, with that it's 90 something percent certain that this is it, but it won't 100% say so just to avoid the possibility of it ever being proven wrong, although that's unlikely.
Yeah.
Artie, you have any further thoughts on it, or?
Yeah, well, the church has got to be careful in all these things. It's prudent in all its judgments on operations, artifacts. It has to be. It's protecting us, but it has kept it for all these years. It's been in the for all these years. It seems it has been in the hands of the faithful. We think it was probably Mary and John who took it from Jerusalem when they moved out. We can track it fairly closely. A lot of people used to think that, especially those who believed it was a fake, thought it was, it had just appeared in the 14th century and stuff like that. We've now proven that to be entirely wrong. Those who did the carbon dating testing on it said that it was from the 14th century. However, they only took 1% of the data that they gathered, and the 99% of the gross data they never showed to anyone, nor was anyone allowed to review it. Now we can because of a fellow called Tristan Casabianca, who works for Isabella Marinelli's team in Italy, and he sued them with a Freedom of Information Act. And when we got the gross data, and we're able to look at that, we could see that 99% of that data pointed in the direction of it being 2,000 years old. And they only took a dating and gave that out from a piece of the cloth, which we know to be anomalous because it was handled over centuries by people holding the cloth up. And when we fluoresce it in ultraviolet light, where the rest of the shroud is sort of lovely warm reds and golds, and that particular part that they took it from fluoresces forest green. It's different than any other part of the shroud. Also, it seems that there was a patch put in there at some point. So that data was greatly corrupted. So what we can go on now is we have a Pray Codex, which is a prayer sheet from the 1100s, which is way before the date that the carbon dating gave, and it shows the burial of a man on a herringbone twill shroud, which is what the shroud is, a 3/1 warp and weft, with no thumbs because we can't see. Remember, on the shroud we couldn't see the thumbs, and this has a drawing of a man with no thumbs being buried in a herringbone twill shroud. And if we look at iconography, at paintings way back to the 6th century, then we can see that indeed a lot of those icons were taken using the shroud as source material.
Okay,
There's
so
a wealth of
certainly,
evidence.
yes, there's a lot of evidence, and thank you for laying that out there. On the other side, what are some of the main objections? You touched briefly on carbon dating and other controversies regarding the shroud.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of different theories on how it could have been created. The carbon dating one was the most sort of dramatic, sort of crescendo of attacks against the validity of the shroud, if you want to call it that. But a lot of people have come up with different ideas of how it could have been created. Some people say maybe it was painted on there. Some people say it was some kind of a photographic effect. Other people have said that it was like a rubbing or a drawing of some kind. But if you take all the information from there was a big research project in the 70s called the STIRP project, the Shroud of Turin research project, not the most original name, but they did all kinds of analysis on the shroud, photographic. They took sticky tape samples, they did chemical analysis, they did there were physicists, there were all kinds of disciplines of science that looked at it. So we have all this very conclusive data that shows that this image, however it was created, is not a painting, it's not a drawing, it's not a rubbing. So any theory that's been put forward has been unable to disprove that data or to satisfy the requirements for it to be true. Um, so I think people get there was a recent one, I think it was somebody from Brazil put something out there that was disputing it, but that was also taken down as well in the same journal that it was published in. So there's been lots of different attempts, and people get like notoriety and some 15 minutes of fame by trying to come up with some counter theory, but none of them have stood the test of time so far.
Yeah, yeah, there's been quite a few. One of the most recent ones was a bas relief, where they had a low relief thing, and they heated the image and put it on over the top. But the thing is, the shroud has never been disproven. It's no attempt has ever managed to recreate the shroud in its entirety. The bas relief, where they heated the image and then put a cloth on it, did make a bit of an image, but that's all it did. It didn't put in 2,000 years of pollen samples. It didn't put in three-dimensional information that can be built up from there up into an actual statue of the shroud. So some people, one person even put bacteria on their friend's face and put a cloth on it and then got it off. And yeah, it made a bit of an image, but it looked like something a 3-year-old had drawn. There was £1 million reward for anyone who could recreate the shroud in its entirety. It has never been collected. No one can, we have no way of knowing how this was done, other than it appears to be some kind of radiation that came from inside the body.
So, who is the man behind the shroud for you?
I mean, for me, it's the Lord, There's no hesitation that I have in saying that. And
So, my final question is, why do you think the mystery of the Shroud of Turin continues to speak to people in the modern world?
yeah, I mean, one of the things that is really clear is as mankind and our own kind of study of science and technology evolves, the shroud reveals to us more. So in 1898, when the first photographs were taken of the shroud, when it was exhibited, um, photography had been around for a little while, but this was the first time someone had taken a picture of the shroud, and it was when the negative image was revealed. So Secondo Pia, the photographer, was in the darkroom developing the photographs, and the positive image shows what you expect to see, the shroud and this kind of faint image, but the negative image showed this very compelling, you can see it on the wall behind me, much more powerful image of the Lord. And so that was a kind of point in time where the shroud went from being a devotional sort of object to more of a fascination at a scientific level, and that continues to be true. The more we're able to understand our natural world and even like nuclear physics, the shroud is telling us more and more information. So it continues to reveal to us. And I think just God in his wisdom, the Lord in his wisdom, could see where mankind would be at this point in time and knew that we needed something more convincing, something more compelling, something that satisfied more of that skeptical, maybe doubtful kind of scientific mind. So this gives us a lot of ammo to kind of satisfy that curiosity or address any kind of doubt.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the shroud has been it's been a sign for all the times. We look back when Peter and John raced to the tomb, and John entered, he saw, and he believed, even though, as Father Dalton would say, you want to grab him and say, "So what?" But we think the shroud clearly was still wrapped, still in the fairly in the shape of a human being, but no person in there. They saw that. I'm sure they saw the image that moved on. The image was passed around for a while, and for each age, it seems to have come into its own. And now we're in the 21st century. It is very much a sign for our times. We now have technology that brought out things we never knew were there. The serum halo around the side wound in the heart, we wouldn't have known that without ultraviolet radiation. Yeah, that we can count. That we know now that the crown of thorns was a cap of thorns. We know he was pierced through the wrists. There's so many different things that tells us that we never knew before. And we can make statues out of it now with the three-dimensional information. It is very much a sign for our times today.
Well, thank you so much, Robert Fries and Archie Nolan, for coming onto Radio Maria today to share your amazing knowledge about the Shroud of Turin. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks very much.
God bless.